The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Bronx Roots with Michael Preminger and David Hubler. David is here with me, Ralph Tycho, and Michael will presumably join us momentarily. David, how are you, sir?
I am good, and you?
I can't complain. It's a summer day in Northern California, which means it's like a nice spring day. It never gets to really be summer, but for about 10 days a year where we get a real hot spell. But
is that it? Are you in it now? The hot spell?
It's funny. I could be if I drove 10 miles. If I drove 10 miles east to a different county, Contra Costa County, the weather is well up in the 90s. Here in directly across the bay from San Francisco, it's absolutely moderate. It's always like 70 degrees this time of year, and that's what it is today. And the sun is shining, and I understand the sun is shining by you in Maryland.
Yes. Normally we're into the sweltering season here, but and today is pretty humid. But it's good to see the sun. We've been having several days, a couple of weeks of rain, and I noticed in the park today that paths that normally are dry were moist and damp from all the rain that we've had. So it's good. We're into a good period, I hope. And
it's a growing period too. I'm sure when it dries out a little bit, you get the flowers growing. And
well, yeah, we've got. In fact, my wife has one plant that we keep having to cover during the rain, simply because it's so moist from one of the heavy rains that you don't want to drown all the plants in there. So we cover it when it rains, which sounds counterproductive, but it seems to be working. So.
Seems to be working.
Yeah.
Which is the name of the game. That's a life's lesson too. If it's working, don't fix it. Don't.
Right. Leave it alone. Yes.
Leave it alone. Let things flow. And that takes patience sometimes, but there you go. Hey, you had a great subject we talked about off the air a little bit, and it involves former Yankee outfielder Paul O'Neill in a conversation that he had on the air.
Yeah. With Michael Kay, the Yankee play-by-play, one of the Yankee play-by-play announcers. And Michael Kay, was born in the Bronx, and O'Neill was born. I know he's from Ohio. It might have been the Cincinnati area. I'm not sure. But they were talking, and Paul O'Neill said, you're from the Bronx. And he said, that has a certain stature to it. The Bronx. The Bronx. And he said that's, and most people don't know how the article "the" came in there. But his point was that just by saying it, people automatically know where it is. And it got me thinking that, it is rare. There are only about, at least, I could say, two other place names that begin with "the," and one is The Hague in the Netherlands, and the Crimea is probably the other one. Although now they're saying the Vatican. That's the one I missed. Yeah, the Vatican. So it's a very rare combination. Unlike other languages like Spanish, there are a lot of place names that begin with "la" or "el," the same article for "the" that we have in English. So it drew me into thinking about it's not just the name that made it an unusual place to grow up, I think, because I only grew up in one place, so I can't report on other places I grew up in, although I'm sure a lot of military families, the kids could do that.
At least you grew up. How about that one?
Well, sometimes I'm not sure, and my wife is never sure, so,
okay.
We don't know. But, so Yeah, I was because I was thinking about this that it I won't say unique because unique is an overused word, but there were some things about New York City, growing up in the city, that made it rather distinctive from other areas. And two things stood out in my mind. One was candy stores, and the other was no, I forgot it. The other one, candy stores and
delicatessens. I'll bet.
well, yeah, delicatessens, but I know it was bakeries, regular
Yes.
Now, I don't care what you say. I know there are a lot of chain grocery stores out there. We have a couple right here where they do their own baking, but it's not the same. I don't know what it is. The aroma, perhaps, which is missing. Hold on a second. I think we have Mike on the phone here.
Michael.
Hold on. Is that Michael? Hi, get on. Call in. I can't hear him.
All right, he's calling you on your number. In other words.
Yeah, my cell phone. Yeah. Okay. Well, you heard me say call in.
Yeah.
Maybe he can't. So, what I was saying, candy stores, which are really foreign in many areas of the country, and I'm talking now New York City, not just the Bronx. Brooklyn neighborhoods had them as well. Not so much in Manhattan, but Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island, they all had candy stores and mom and pop bakeries. And there was something about those two kinds of stores that really distinguished a neighborhood. I know where I grew up, we had 3 candy stores and at least 3 bakeries, all within a block's walking. So that was one of the things I was thinking about because it is rather unusual. So many people today are used to going into, I couldn't say A&P anymore, but a Safeway and, excuse me.
Fairmont. We had a Fairmont for a while, too.
Yeah, there's several large
and they would change hands and change names, and all of a sudden giving you money to a totally different corporation, but getting the same overpriced food as whatever generation.
But one of the great things...
Excuse me. Did you have relatives in other boroughs in New York that you would refer to them almost by borough? My mother would say when we're going up to my grandparents in the Bronx, we're going to the Bronx. The Bronx is coming for dinner.
That's an unusual construction. I never heard that one. But of course,
that's how it was. Yeah, well, who's going to be here? Well, the Bronx, which meant my grandparents. Brooklyn. That kind of.
Sounds almost like a political convention.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was.
The great state of the Bronx.
There was a lot of screaming going on, but it was different. When you say that, it brings us to politics. And we can't not be affected by what happened and what's happening with these kids being separated. With a Bronx, New York spirit. Can you speak to that a little bit?
The Bronx, New York spirit?
Yeah, well, through the Bronx, New York spirit, speak to what's going on with the separation of children at the borders. Just speak to it from your wisdom. I'd like to hear your input, and I enjoy hearing that, David.
I know I'm not alone when I say it's a horrendous situation. Barbaric would not be too strong a term. You don't take kids away from their parents. Look, this is my calling again. Can I just pick it up?
Oh, sure.
Hello? Oh, did you hear that, Ralph?
No.
My can't get connected to the line.
Huh. Well, why don't we take a break? I'll tell you what we'll do.
Yeah.
We'll take a break. We'll reopen. We'll all hang up, reopen the line, pause for the cause, and we'll try to all three get back on a line that's copacetic.
Okay.
Okay.
Mike? Okay.
Okay. Hang up and bear with us. We'll be right back, everybody. Bye.
Okay.
We're back. Bronx Roots. David's here. Michael is about to call in. We're getting our technical problems solved. And David, you and I were talking about candy stores and bakeries.
Candy stores and bakeries, right. The essence of
Bronx.
New York life, right. The essence of New York. Yeah. But if there were two characteristics of any of the neighborhoods in the Bronx and elsewhere in the city, it was candy stores and bakeries. Candy stores were where you hung out, tried to read the comic books without having to pay for them, or that newspaper headlines. And bakeries are where you went to get fresh breads and rolls and cakes and pies on almost daily basis. So those two are really the cornerstones of existence in every Bronx neighborhood. And I'm going to just say every Bronx neighborhood, but it applies to the other residential neighborhoods in the city.
Right. Now, New York City, Manhattan is just absolutely the total difference. It's a working borough. People come into the borough to work and generally go to Queens, Staten Island, the Bronx, to live, bedroom communities. Even back, you think New York is just a hustle and bustle. There's some residential areas, some real, let's say, woodsy, a lot of green, way out in Queens and what have you. A lot of parks in the Bronx. So
they call it the borough of parks. Just like
right.
Brooklyn's called the borough of churches. Bronx is a borough of parks.
Right. And but you're right about one thing. No other borough has that V in front of it.
Right. The article makes a difference. And as you pointed out earlier, it was the way your parents spoke about your grandparents coming to visit, or you're going to the Bronx.
Coming to visit the Bronx.
And that's exactly how it got its name back in the 16-somethings or early 17-somethings, because there was only one family living up there, the Bronx, Jonas Bronx and his family. And people who wanted to go there said, we're going up to see the Bronx, meaning the plural. But the spelling became an X instead of KS. I don't know how that occurred. Maybe the Bronx historian could probably tell us about that. But that's where the term comes. That's why it's the Bronx, as opposed to the Brooklyn. If the Brooklyn family had settled in Brooklyn in 16-something, it might then be called the Brooklyn. But but just getting back to this notion of these small mom and pop bakeries and candy stores. The candy stores are a unique community gathering place. You met friends there. Our fathers would go there to pick up the newspapers and the cigarettes or whatever, pints of ice cream made fresh right there.
In the evenings, you'd wait for the daily news to come in with the scores and what have you at the.
Well, the Daily News was a morning newspaper. It was the Post.
Yeah,
that
but
was
they had the evening editions.
Yeah, they had that. What is it called? What do they call it? The Lobster edition, I think. You could tell the early morning edition of the Daily News was printed on pink paper. And that signaled that it wasn't the late edition; it was the early edition. So, but they were out there, and if you recall, every candy store had a wooden booth that held all the newspapers for the day. And I guess they wheeled it out when they opened the store. They wheeled it out onto the sidewalk, and then they wheeled it back in the evening when they closed up shop. But those are the two cornerstones. Unlike other communities, rural communities where the church was the gathering place for the neighbors, in New York and especially in the Bronx, that's because I know it. It was the candy store and the bakery. The third leg of the triangle in New York City living was the mom and pop grocery store. People didn't go there to hang out, and they didn't go there to read the newspapers. They came there to get their groceries. Oh, it looks like Mike can't get in. Hold on one second.
Michael is having some trouble. That's Michael Preminger. And David Hubler is here. We're talking about the Bronx. Just one of those days for him, technically. I have them virtually every day of my life. There's something with the internet, with phones, with cell phones, with dropping calls. It's a wonderful age to be educated in. We learn so much by having this information available. Anything you want to do, you Google it in. Google, tell me this, tell me that. But what goes with it presents its own separate set of problems. What can I tell you? I'm here, Ralph Tycho, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, talking to David Hubler, who's trying to get Michael on the air as we speak. What I'm going to do to keep from rambling, I'm going to push another button, take another break, splice this all together, and we'll have a super podcast. Are you back?
Yeah, I've been back. Mike still cannot get through. And I just flipped it, and I had a little trouble getting back to you. So I don't know what you want to do. Mike figured he'll take a pass this week, and we'll try to work something out before next week.
Okay, let's continue our conversation, and we'll miss him and see him next week, or at least hear from him.
Yeah. All right. Are we on? Are we still rolling?
We are still running.
Okay, good. Well, I was saying the third leg of the triangle was the mom and pop grocery store. And now the interesting thing about that is they didn't stock everything in the world. They stocked only certain items, and you went into them, and there was one guy behind the counter who was usually the owner, and you either handed him a list of things you wanted, or you read it out to him as he walked up and down the aisles, and he had one of these long claws. Remember that?
Flash a memory. You didn't do it. He walked.
Right.
Thing to take stuff off the
That's
top
right.
shelf.
It was a big clamp. Yep, that was it. You know,
and the stick. And he had a white apron on.
Oh, and he always had an apron on, and he had this clip, and he'd pull a can off the shelf and pop it into his hands and put it on the counter. When he had everything on the counter, he would take out a brown paper bag and a pencil stub. And he would add up on the paper bag what everything cost, and then add it up, and that was your total. And then he'd put it into the cash register. I mean, it was a brilliant operation. And I remember my mother said, because I was never very good in math. I was really poor. And she'd say, you'll never be able to do this job. You can't have it. And I was thinking, well, yeah, that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of other things I can't do, and not too sorry about it.
Yeah, you'll never be able to be a ditch digger.
Yeah,
ditch
right.
digger. I'm sorry to have to tell you that.
but it was a wonderment how these guys did it, and I assume, I mean, you didn't get a tape, a printout of everything you bought, and there was no corporate office somewhere in North Carolina or someplace that's keeping track of everything you ever bought. But even the guy in the, even the owner of the store who knew you by name, he didn't remember. He might remember a few things you bought regularly. But what good would it have done to keep track of everybody? He just had a cash register and a store.
It was a simple operation. It's much
Very.
more simple than it is today.
It epitomized the time. It was a simple...
I was just rambling to our audience while you were trying to get Michael on the air, how the new technology that we have is so good for learning. There's so much available at the click of a button. But on the other hand, it is so frustrating, so many different ways, so many things can go wrong, cell phones dropping, miscommunications, this, that, and the other thing with the Internet, that the frustration of it's about equal.
Yes.
By the time you get to the end of the day, if you're looking to accomplish things, if you have to put it into the computer and enter it with codes and this, that, and that, it's time consuming. You could be doing other things.
Yeah.
So it giveth and it taketh away.
That's true. And you begin to wonder. Well, every time I do something on the computer, they always ask for a password. I have 4 pages here that I've printed out of passwords. And then they throw another monkey wrench into the work. 6 months down the road, they say, your password has expired. Enter a new password. It can't be the same as the old one. And it's got to include 4 digits and a couple of squiggly marks. And, it's just
something has to be capitalized.
That's right. It has to be capitalized and written in cuneiform or something. So,
right. And secure from who?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I read an article recently just talking about the same topic. That the idea was saying that in terms of armies meeting each other on the battlefield in a war, in the main, they had to match up somewhat. I mean, for example, when the German army marched into Poland in 1939, their army was much, much superior to what the Poles had. And so the Poles were defeated in a day and a half, 2 days, something like that. When the United States entered the war, you're dealing with 2 massive armies, okay? And, of course, the Allies were involved, too. I mean to. But what this article was saying was that today, just about any schnook with a computer and a little savvy can bollocks up the works of the Internet, the grids in a major American city or even the country, just by hacking into it. One person can actually fend off and expose the issues of a major corporation, as has happened recently over the last several years. When hackers broke into Target and got all the customers' name, when they broke into the Office of Personnel Management and got out thousands and thousands of current and former government employees' personal data. I know, because I got email from them, and I'm on their list that they're watching out for, because I am a former federal employee, and somewhere around there, somebody must have hacked my name. Probably and name and age and all sorts of stuff is included in that hack. So, and that didn't take an army the size of the U.S. Army to do that. So I thought it was a very interesting point that the balance has shifted in terms of.
You could throw another dynamic in. You have people from different countries doing that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's right. I mean, usually these hackers are in Russia or China or even in North Korea. In the article, he pointed out that North Korea, I mean, it doesn't have the annual GDP of the state of Rhode Island, and yet it's able to give us fits with computer hacking. Yeah. So that age of innocence, or that, the man with his claw in the grocery store is long gone.
I have a question for you. Off the subject a little bit, but the world is always on subject. Is there anything that Trump is doing with North Korea, for instance, or the trade deficit, this, that, and the other thing, that might be, we both despise the man personally. His ideology sucks. Is there anything redeeming?
Give me about a year to think of it. No.
Okay.
Do
you think headway was made in North Korea?
That's the $64,000 question. We don't know. He doesn't know. He talks up a good game. He says, "Oh yeah, well, they did talk. Okay, they met, they talked, but what's behind North Korea? What's behind this leadership? We don't know. We know nothing about it." I remember reading some materials that were put out yearly by the CIA. There are these guidebooks and stuff about various countries, and this was during the Cold War era. And I remember reading and being really surprised. They were talking about the Chinese leadership, and I guess this goes back to Mao Zedong. In most cases, when they listed the names of these political honchos there in Beijing, they didn't know anything about their families. They didn't know if they were married, single, had children. And this was coming from the top agencies, espionage and intelligence agency we had. And so we didn't know anything about those people. So we don't know. We know a good deal about North Korea, but we certainly don't know the ins and outs of his immediate entourage and what they're planning to do. It's very hard. I know from speaking to a friend that it's very hard to infiltrate North Korea. To get human intelligence on the ground there, because first of all, it couldn't be a Westerner. It would have to be somebody who's an Asian, and it would be a very, very dangerous assignment for someone. So we don't know. I mean, he did get to speak with him, but on the other hand, our former presidents, Republican and Democrat, they chose to avoid him because they didn't want to give him a semblance of authority, a semblance of equality with the other leaders of the world. And they did that purposely.
He kind of pushed the button to get Trump to the point where, he's throwing missiles over Japan and into the ocean and this, that, and the other thing. Which is something he didn't do when under previous administrations.
No, but they knew that they were working on these projects. They knew enough about that. But no administration since Kim Il Sung, the grandfather now, took over North Korea. No American president.
Yeah,
none. No, they refused to meet with him. Once you meet, an American president meets with a former leader of another country, it gives that person stature. That's why so many of these leaders come to the White House to have their picture taken with the president, and they see them two sitting in chairs and chatting, and it plays well back in the hinterlands, as they used to say.
You must remember The Mouse That Roared with Peter.
I love that book. I loved that book, and I loved the movie. Yes.
It was
yes.
Terrific.
Leonard Wimberly was the author of that book, and it was Great book. I remember I was working. It was a summer. I was working for summer, and I had to take a bus to get to work. And I would sit there and I would laugh out loud. And of course, then the film came out, and of course, Peter Sellers was just perfect. He played about 5 or 6 different parts in the movie. I've seen it once since, and it's still just as funny as it ever was. And it rings so true, you know. The premise of we go to war with the United States and we lose, then the United States has to support us.
Right. And it's the same today, right? You're paying for their infrastructure. We bomb the hell out of them and then pay for the infrastructure. And, that's very reminiscent of what's going on. But yes, they are roaring. And I think it's... for whatever it's worth, just sitting down next to them, though, maybe they'd be less likely, and maybe Trump would be less likely to push the button.
Well, it's quite possible, yeah.
You
Usually, though, when
that you put some humanity to it, but he doesn't seem to respond to humanity, so I may be dreaming on...
Are you talking about Kim or Trump?
I don't know. I could be talking about either of them.
Yeah, I know. I mean, after all, Kim did murder members of his own family.
Right.
So, you know.
To say nothing of the unbelievable atrocities that, according to articles that I've read, that he's has pulled and is pulling on his people.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not a nice man.
Not a nice man.
I'll tell you what, as far as character goes, couldn't be much worse than Trump. I mean, this guy is really, there's a coldness about him in his response to the way he sent his wife down there with that stupid jacket.
Yeah, that's a real puzzle. That's one thing that really puzzles me so much. So much of that what goes on in the White House, especially this White House, is totally orchestrated. If you see I saw a daily appointment list for Trump. They usually put them out for all, Monday, October, whatever it is, and 9:15. They're down to the minute. 9:15, Trump march. President goes somewhere. 9:32, heads for Andrews Air Force Base. And in this case, she walks out of the White House with that dopey jacket on.
Somebody either set her up, or it's just we're a big goof to them. In other words, they're just looking. We got all the money, we got all the power, and we'll just let her wear this jacket.
And it wasn't even a really expensive jacket. They said it cost about $35. It's pocket change.
I think it was just a jacket for her to wear on the plane. It wasn't because when there was a video of her actually meeting.
Right, she wasn't wearing it then.
She wasn't wearing it. So.
No, but. So if she was going to wear it on the plane, because the plane was going to be cold or something.
You're right.
Carry it onto the plane.
Right.
Nobody has to. Yeah, it's just crazy. You're right, though, Ralph. I think there was a certain element to their thumbing your nose at the, let them eat cake kind of message. We can do what we want.
Now, months ago, people would use the comparison to me, a Jew, and you're a Jew too, as well. And the comparison was in Nazi Germany. Everything was fascist this, Trump this, a fascist. Isn't this, if you stop the press, if you control the presses, this, that, and the other thing, if you control the borders, don't let people in, don't let people out. And I go, well, that's a pretty big reach to compare what's going on today, and we're talking 6 months ago maybe, to what's going on, what went on in Nazi Germany. Is it my imagination, or has that reach become really not so much of a stretch? Not a reach, a stretch. And I don't think it's that much of a stretch anymore.
Well, there's certainly similarities. In fact, somebody, I forget whose column it was today in the Post, made a point of mentioning some of those similarities. The one that sticks out in my mind right now is his use of the term infestation. You know, I mean, you may have an infestation of mosquitoes or mice or something
dehumanizing people.
Yes, dehumanizing people, and the same side of the coin, so to speak, was the way the Nazis portrayed Jews by caricaturing them as rodents, and in cartoon form, things like that, and calling for their extermination, which is what they were actually after. There are a number of frightening similarities. Yes, there certainly are.
And if you listen to the way he describes illegal aliens or whatever, not alien, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He uses words that are much like that. They're an infestation of folks. I can't think of what I had in mind. The word he used to describe the people. They're not everybody that comes to this country illegally. Some of them have to get in. They have to escape tyranny.
Right. Yeah.
And that they can't get in any other way. And if they're going to save their lives, we should say, where'd they come from? Why? Let's give them a break. It's a melting pot. This is where people come. That's how it was with my grandparents.
Oh, yeah. Of course. There's so many others, too. Yes. Yeah. One of the columnists today pointed out that Trump's whole demeanor seems to be that sort of authoritarian. He even, when he sort of pouts and puts his lower lip out and juts his jaw out, you could take a picture of Mussolini, and the two of them look alike. For their the way they're posed there. So it's just awful. I just read that the spokesman for not the DEA, for the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, out in your neck of the woods, out in the San Francisco area, just quit. Because he said, right, point blank, I can't tell these lies anymore. They had, phony statistics about how many of these so-called aliens, which is sort of like, now with the term alien seems to have an outer space connotation to it. How many of these aliens are actually killers, and it's just phony statistics. And he said, I can't do that anymore.
Bring up the families of the few people. There are people killed, and there are families that grieve. That's sad. But under the circumstances of separating thousands of children from their parents, I can't imagine the psychosis the mass psychosis that's going to hit a community
of the children. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
They're going to be on psychiatrist couches for a long time.
Yeah, and who's going to, maybe. A lot of these people don't have money for food. They certainly aren't going to be able to pay for professional care for these kids, no matter where they wind up. It's a very terrible situation.
And there's something else involved with the reunification of these kids. Some of them have been deemed guardianships. So there are folks taking care of them that through state laws, individual state laws, New York included, that they have control of where the kid's going to go. And if you come to them and say, we want to reunite these kids with their parents who have been deported to Guatemala or bumfuck Egypt or someplace else, and they don't know where they are, they could be in peril, that's why they came here in the first place, you got the guardians of these people making decisions now. So you got state, city, federal courts. It's a clusterfuck.
Yeah. How much better it would have been if Trump had said, we're going to help the government of El Salvador, we're going to help the government of Guatemala to stop the violence, to get rid of, to find and arrest the MS-13 there in their home countries. We're going to help these governments so that they don't lose their citizens, instead of waiting till they come to the U.S. border and stopping them and throwing them in a concentration camp.
Right, and as for Mexico, Trump says, we don't get anything from Mexico. They just blah, blah, blah with the drugs. Well, you know what? Why don't you legalize drugs? The war on drugs is absolutely archaic at this point. We lost it. Drugs won. We lost. Let's get on. We lost other things. We lost Vietnam. Lost our dignity. We're losers once in a while. Let's get on with it. Legalize it. Stop all these drug wars. If there's no need for drugs, if people can have their prescriptions filled and what have you, it would take care of an awful lot in this country.
Yeah, well, little by little, that seems to be the way we're going, with a number of states legalizing the use of marijuana.
But that's not a drug. That's not even a drug, let alone what I'm talking about is the heroin and the cocaine and what have you that's being brought, that lives are lost at the border and what have you. Marijuana's the least of it, believe me.
Yeah. Okay.
So we got to have some change, and we certainly aggressive talking about the Bronx. But I got to throw one more grocery story in.
Okay.
You described the grocery store to a T of the neighborhood grocery store on Astoria Boulevard, about 3 or 4 blocks from where we lived. Mom and pop grocery store. The Jankelewitzes owned it. I went to school. I was in the 6th grade with him. But before that, I was about 7 or 8 years old, and I go into this grocery store, and somebody says, you know who's working in that grocery store? Carl Furillo. It was a winter job. Either that or he bought that grocery store. But there I walked in as a little kid with this exact white apron that I was talking, with a stick in his hand.
And it was Carl Furillo?
It was Carl Furillo.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah, like about 1954, I would say, 50.
Wow.
Maybe. To put, it could have been, right about 53. And
that's when the team was in their heyday. Yeah.
Yes, it was, and that good example of how these guys did not make very much money.
No.
Many of them had off season jobs, day jobs, whatever they called it. But seeing him in that store and listening to you tell the story about writing with a pen, with a piece of pencil, just a scrub of a pencil on the bag, adding it all up.
I know. Yeah.
Beautiful. It's a vision. I never would have visualized that in a million years. That's a great recollection.
Well, my wife keeps throwing that up to me. When I go to, like for example, just today before we went on, I ran up to the grocery chain store, and I bought about 4 or 5 items. And I had done the same thing yesterday with another 4 or 5 items. And my wife says she calls it like the Pee Wee complex, because there there was one of these little mom and pop stores around the corner from our place, and it was called Pee-wee's. And you just go in and you buy 1 or 2 items and 3 items, whatever, and then you go back the next day for another 3. And so, I don't really feel I don't feel one of those store carts anymore. I just have like 3 or 4 items. I can usually use the basket. And she says that's because you
a little hand basket that they use.
Yeah, the little handbag. She says that's yeah. So that's.
Do you have 7-Elevens where you are?
Yes, of course, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
yeah.
So they're a good example. They've replaced mom and pop stores.
They have, I know, and it's not the same thing. It's not at all. They have those.
Not the same personalization of something.
No, of course not. They have those horrible, greasy Frankfurters rotating on those spindles for days on end.
I'll have one of those. That was last Thursdays. It looks familiar, and I liked it. I came in, I wasn't hungry, but it really looked appealing, and it's Tuesday of next week, but what the fuck, I'll have one.
Yeah, I have one. It looks a lot more appealing than the pizza.
I'll be back next week. Get one started for me.
Yeah, right. Put it on the grill.
Right. On the Barbie.
Yes, yeah, oh, God. Yeah, and they're almost like Starbucks. And that's another operation that has killed the mom and pop store. Starbucks, even though
the mom and pop coffee shop off times.
Yeah, I mean, even if you went in to buy a can of coffee, these places have taken over. They've taken over. So.
That's true. Absolutely. All right, sir.
Okay.
We
solved the problems of the world.
Sorry we messed up with Michael. I don't know how. We tried, and we'll catch him next week.
I hope so. Yes. Okay.
Be well.
Take care, Rob.
David Hubler is here. I'm Ralph Tycho. I'm here. We miss Michael. We'll be back next week. The name of the show is Bronx Roots, and the network is the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Be well, everybody. Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.